and Iran's President Hassan Rouhani. He'd like to see that happen within weeks. President Trump attending meetings throughout the weekend with leaders of the G7, that's France, the UK, Canada, Italy, Germany, and Japan, and leaders of other industrialized countries invited to participate on the sidelines, including India, Egypt, and Australia. But one meeting the president didn't attend was the meeting on climate change. The president has been skeptical of the science behind climate change. The White House later said a senior administration official attended because the president had bilateral meetings with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But as you can see there, both Merkel and Modi were seen at the climate meeting. Now, during that meeting, world leaders agreed to contribute $22 million to battle the wildfires in the Amazon rainforest. French President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement at the end of the summit. While the details of the package will be worked out in the coming weeks, French outlets citing unnamed French officials report most of the aid will be used to pay for firefighting planes. Macron did say the funds will be earmarked for issues that will help guarantee the future of the Amazon, like reforestation. He said the aid package will officially launch at the upcoming United Nations General Assembly in September. The French president said he'd make French military support available to Brazil immediately. President Trump has previously said he offered the U.S.'s help to Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. President Bolsonaro deployed more than 40,000 Brazilian troops to the rainforest this past weekend to assist in firefighting efforts. I spoke a short time before air, with Dr. Shweta Chakraborty. She is a risk and behavioral scientist who also serves as the U.S. representative of We Don't Have Time. It's a social media network for people who want to be a part of the solution to the climate crisis. And I started by asking her to put into context for us just how devastating these fires are.
These Amazon fires are exactly, unfortunately, what we anticipated we would be seeing as the planet warms. None of this wasn't already known by scientists, and we are very much in the phase of impact now. We are seeing these increase in frequency, we are seeing them increase in severity, and there's a term that meteorologists use called teleconnections, which means that climate events, no matter where they're happening, are connected. We're part of a global weather and climate system that impacts each other. So it doesn't matter if this seems like a unique event in a particular country that isn't where a viewer watching this show might live. It still impacts the entire global citizenry because we are on one collective connected planet. And so the severity of these wildfires really impacts every single one of us.
And we'll get more to the teleconnections in a moment. And you touched upon this, but why should people care about these fires? You hear people say, well, it's so far away, it doesn't affect me. But this is, some scientists say, between maybe 6 and 20% of the Earth's oxygen comes from the Amazon.
That's right. And sometimes we have to go back and just remember what we learned in Science 101 in 3rd grade, which is that photosynthesis is plants turning carbon dioxide into oxygen. Oxygen is critical for us, our survival, and for food and agricultural production. So plants play a critical role, and the Amazon is basically the densest system of plants that we have and is responsible for 1/6 of the carbon emissions that we produce. It's held in the Amazon. And on any given normal year, the Amazon also sucks up about 20% of carbon emissions. So it plays such a critical function for human survival and for human food production. This is why the Amazon burning down, the plants and that photosynthesis that is so necessary to our survival, that's why it's such an impact for everyone who breathes in air and eats food. Nobody is immune to this.
And you mentioned this a few minutes ago, but I want to dig a little deeper. How are these fires specifically connected to climate change?
So when you have a planet that is warming, there's going to be impacts. They range from longer drought seasons, increased precipitation. Those two things might seem disconnected, but they're actually very much aligned to the climate science. We have these impacts, and the fact that we are all connected, it's not surprising that we are seeing these increase in severity and frequency. So, for example, what we've been witnessing in the United States and California are these longer wildfire seasons all year round. They used to be a specific period of time in the year, and now you're seeing pretty severe wildfires all year round. That's going to happen across the world. All of these what we normally would see as seasonal events, like hurricane season or wildfire season, are going to become this phenomenon that we experience all year. And so that is something that's really not just unique to wildfires, but all impacts of climate, of the planet warming. And so this is, to answer your question, this is ultimately to be expected as we move from 1.5 degrees, which is what we were trying to stay at, to the 2-degree warming path that we are on by 2040. That gives us less than 30 years to really get off this avenue towards a very uncomfortable future collectively as a joint global citizenry.
And moving forward, I mean, can and should the Brazilian government be doing more to battle these fires?
So we can appreciate that countries, from an economic point of view, ultimately want to exploit resources so as to have economic gain, especially those countries that are developing and have seen other countries develop and enjoy prosperity. It makes complete sense from that behavioral perspective and from a political perspective that that is what the governance system would want to do for their own particular country. That being said, the exploitation of these resources at the gain and benefit of a country like Brazil is at the detriment of the world and ultimately will be for Brazil as well. So there needs to be real economic incentive through either soft incentives and carrots versus actual harder mechanisms to put in place to convince governments not to exploit, but rather be responsible stewards of the resources, because these national borders are very arbitrary. Amazon could have been in any country. It happens to be in Brazil. So, and we all need it. So how do we create an incentive system so that the governance of a particular country really protects what is necessary and important for all of us around the world? Brazil should be doing more, but the world also has to support the country and give it reason and recognition that what happens in the Amazon does not stay in the Amazon. That will be critical because the Amazon is the lungs of the planet. And so if we don't protect it, truly not just the country, but the entire world will suffer.
So an interesting idea as we look at policy moving forward, what other countries could be doing to incentivize how countries are using the resources in their countries. But I do want to get to the news of the day, the $20 or so million that the G7 countries pledged to help combat these fires in the Amazon. Is that enough?
And we had the leaders of the world convene at the G7 to really talk about the climate crisis. And yet, if you don't have the support of the United States, you're not going to reach a consensus. So ultimately, all that can be done is something along the lines of financial support. And $20 million is a drop in the bucket. It's not even close to the hundreds of billions of dollars that the U.S. has spent on relief and recovery following wildfires, hurricanes, droughts, all of the above that is linked to the planet warming. So how is it that a fraction of that for something way more severe with global implications is going to do anything beyond some sort of relief and recovery, but so much more needs to be done in terms of proactive risk management so that these fires are minimized before they even start. And that's really what needed to happen out of the G7. But ultimately, if we don't have the support of the U.S. government, there's very little these leaders can do to really be proactive against what is really a climate crisis, a global climate crisis.
Dr. Shweta Chakraborty, thank you so much for your insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lauren.
Indonesia's president says he is relocating the country's capital. It would move northeast from Jakarta to East Kalimantan on the island of Borneo. The move comes after an in-depth study to find the most ideal location. Jakarta, the current capital, is home to more than 10 million people. It's also one of the fastest sinking cities in the world, with half of the city below sea level. Now, environmentalists fear the new location could harm native animals like orangutans. The plan is now in front of Indonesian lawmakers. They'll have to approve the reported $34 billion move before it moves forward. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency announcing it will begin processing applications for marijuana growers who want to grow weed for federal research. While legalization advocates